You're on.
All right. I'm going to start you off on my initial heading out to the islands in the Pacific. We were placed on a troop ship. It was a converted merchant marine ship that I found out was out of Tampa. But we picked it up in California, in San Francisco. And they took us slowly, but in convoys that were zigzagging as we went. So we didn't make much for time. We were on that a month and a half. The ship kept breaking down. It broke down twice on the way. And when a ship goes dead in the water, in the middle of enemy water, why, it's not a very comfortable feeling, but that's what we went through. And 2 meals a day, stand up to eat. We had no mess where you could go in and sit down. And so we couldn't wait to get off that ship. And it finally pulled into Saipan. And Saipan had recently been taken by the Marines and Army. So there were still Japanese troops dug in here and there. And naturally, they put our encampment on the edge of all that. So it was kind of interesting right off the bat. The first night, of course, we didn't have our tent set up, and we had several big tents that held about 50 people. And one of our company clerks came around, looked me up, and he said, "Harwood, where's your cot here?" And I said, well, I took him and showed him which one was mine. He said, "I'll be around to get you about 10 minutes to 12. You're on the 12 to 4 shift."
Midnight.
12, yeah. Midnight to 4. And on guard duty, right? Luckily, we were in a sugar cane field, our encampment. And there wasn't another unit anywhere near us, but they had set up these floodlights on a cliff that was behind our encampment. And they were rappelling down there during the day and throwing these explosive charges into these caves, trying to get the Japanese to come out of there, you know.
What year was that, Teddy?
That was in 1945.
Okay.
It was in the
Year I was born.
winter of 45.
You were 18? 18?
Yeah.
18.
I went in at 44, and I spent the last part of 44 training in down in the Finger Lakes, Sampson Naval Training Center, and then went from there over to Rhode Island, trained as a Seabee. I got put into the Seabees at that point.
So you were in the Navy?
I was in the Navy Seabees, yeah. And that's why I was a troop, not a crew member on these ships. There was 1,000 of us on this ship. Our whole battalion was on it. And as I say, we were 45 days getting from San Francisco to Saipan. We stopped at Pearl Harbor. We were there for about 10 days, getting the ship repaired. And then we went into Eniwetok from there and waited in there about 5 days to get more repairs done to the ship. And then from there to Saipan. And where we went into this encampment that we set up and unloaded all of our equipment and got it ready to go. Made sure everything was working. We ran all the heavy equipment and dug up the place and made roads and stuff up on Saipan. But we loaded up on LSTs. They took us by truck back down to the docks, the piers on Saipan, and where they had LSTs pulled up with the front doors open. And
What is an LST?
we spent the night, about 8 of us, unloading trucks loaded with fuel drums, 55-gallon fuel drums.
Teddy, what is an LST?
An LST is a landing ship tank. That's what the LST stands for, landing ship tank. They were built initially just to haul tanks in, and they found out they could haul bulldozers and everything else just as well. So we loaded our heavy equipment on there, and a lot of trucks and jeeps that we had. But first we loaded all these fuel drums and put them way in the back of the ship, I suppose, because of the balance of the ship, you know. And we had a lot of them. We worked all night long, 8 of us unloading. There was always a truck coming all night. And the fumes from the trucks backing into the LST, and it made it an interesting night. And most of us came out of there with our eyes just burning, you know, and lungs a little also. But we loaded up that ship with all the fuel barrels that they wanted put in there. So then they loaded us on a truck, 8 of us that had been working there together, and took us back to camp. They said when we got back to camp, our tents had all been taken down, and our cots were sitting out in the middle where the tents had been. And they said, okay, guys, find your sea bag and your cot and put them back on the truck. You're going back to the pier.
Here's your hat. What's your hurry?
Yeah. So we loaded all up, and back we go down to the piers. And they kept us together for, I don't know, because they thought we were doing a good job of loading LSTs, I guess, with barrels. But anyway, we get back down there. Been up all night, right? No sleep. And we unloaded our stuff where they told us to unload the truck. And our sea bags and stuff were there, so we kind of tried to land on them and get some rest. So we got a little bit of rest, and then some officer comes around. He said, "See the top deck of this LST?" He said it's had a LCI on it. Came in from the States. It was a brand new LST and LCI on it, and they put them on these huge timbers on the upper deck because they don't have any cranes heavy enough to pick them up on Saipan or any of these islands in the Pacific. You know? So they put them on the top deck of an LST on these greased timbers. I mean, the timbers were like 12 by 20 or so that were huge, and blocked up so that they cleared everything on the deck, you know. Then when they got to Saipan, they took it out in the deep water and flooded one side of the LST so it tipped up like this. Uncabled the thing, and it slid off into the water. See? Okay, now they bring it back to the pier. Say, okay, guys, you got to get all those timbers off there. So we had a 6x6 there that we were going and coming on, and the other guys that I was on a crew with had no idea how to skid a log or skid a timber or anything. And of course, I'd done quite a lot of that. We were getting firewood out for the hotel, and my dad had a tractor, and we were skidding logs. So I had some experience with hooking a cable, and I knew how to hook onto those things to get them off. And so I kind of ran that operation, but it was dirty, you know, all that grease on those timbers. And we worked most of the night getting that cleaned off the top deck of the LST. And when we got finished, the officer come around, was so pleased with our work, I guess. He said, okay, tell you what you guys can do. He knew he'd been a couple nights with no sleep except laying on those bags. And he said, pick yourself out a compartment on this ship. He said, that's where you'll be sleeping. And he said, you can go in and take your bags in there. So I go in and start looking around. We all did. And I said, boy, I'd like to have this the front compartment had a window out into you could see the loading area, you know. And I'm kind of mentally seeing us pulling in on the beach up at Okinawa. We knew that's where we were headed, on the invasion of Okinawa. I said, I'd like to be right up in front and see this whole operation so I know what it looks like, you know. And so we got in the front compartment where the controls were for the front door and the ramp and everything. And they immediately, after we loaded up, we had to put our truck on last. And they hooked a tank of fresh water behind it. I think it was a tank with maybe 500 gallons or so of drinkable water. And we had to back that truck up the ramp with it. And the guy had never backed up a trailer, I don't think. We had some fun trying to back that up the ramp and load it. And it was the last piece of equipment to go on. I mean, and the trucks and Jeeps were just packed bumper to bumper on side by side all over the upper deck by this time. There's another unit. It wasn't our unit. In other words, we'd been separated from our battalion, which is made up of about 1,000 people. There's 8 of us. We weren't even with our own battalion, I found out. When they started loading up, the guys, I didn't know anybody, you know. What's going on? Well, you're going up to Okinawa on this, one way or the other.
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah. So anyway, we finally pulled out the other battalion, and I don't even know what number it was offhand. It wasn't one of the numbers that I've been acquainted with.
So they got the water tank off.
And so we had the water tank on the back of the truck, right? At the head of the top deck. In other words, our truck was up on the top deck, and the loading ramp that they had going to the top deck was quite steep coming down off of there, and quite steep going up on it. I mean, this guy was from Little Falls. It was our truck driver. His name was Lito. I never forget his name. Italian guy, and he was a nice guy though, and he backed that. We managed to help him, and okay, hold it, wait it, you're jackknifing, you know. But we got it up on there and got the ramp up, and then they loaded the lower deck, see. But they had the first one off had to be a trench digger. He was on right in the last one in the bottom deck. And we were the last one on the top deck. So he went off first when we got up to Okinawa. We had that's kind of a long story, but I thought maybe I could tell part of it today and maybe the rest of it
Sure.
some other time. If you got any questions as we go along, I'll be glad to answer. This is all still vivid in my mind. It has been all these years. But we sat out in the harbor for 3 or 4 days on that LST. I don't know why. We hadn't left Saipan. We were in the Saipan harbor yet. They were apparently waiting for a convoy to go up all at once, you know, because we went up in a rather large convoy, and there were a lot of hazards for the convoys. Apparently, they were running into a lot of submarine activity and aircraft activity. So at Saipan, the air raids had stopped by the time we got there. So they were initially, all the air attacks at that time were hit. They were hitting up the fleet up around Okinawa. Let's see. So when we spent 5 days getting up from Saipan to Okinawa, and as I say, we were very comfortable in there, but every night there was a general quarters, and our general's quarters station, my general quarters station, was on the lower deck, not the lower deck, the middle deck, in the crew's mess. They called where they ate their meals. and there was a hatch in the floor and a hatch in the overhead, and we had to pass shells up through for the 3-inch gun on the stern of the ship. That was our general quarter station. A couple of us out of that unit, and of course we were in the very front unit, so you had all those compartments to go through to get back to the back of the stern of the ship where I was supposed to be during general quarters. So I didn't always make it that far before they'd start. They had, in each compartment, they had somebody that was supposed to lock down the hatches between the compartments, you know. And there were like, I don't know, a dozen different compartments on each side of the ship. At least, maybe 20, I don't know. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, I'd get about halfway and maybe they'd be coming the other way, slamming those compartment doors tight. And they had a watertight, you've seen them with a big handle on the inside of it. So then I'd go up through and get on the upper deck. And of course, trying to get through between those trucks, it wasn't very easy. Sometimes I didn't make my general quarters before they all clear sounded, and I'd just go work my way back through the compartments. But anyway, the reason I'm explaining that is when we started seeing Japanese aircraft started attacking the convoys and the Navy, basically the Navy fleet, they were heading for them. I spent the night up on top watching the fireworks, you know, and the whole sky would just be lit up with tracers. But, I mean, the U.S. Navy had really great anti-aircraft guns on board. 50 quadruple 50 caliber things that would pump it out, or 20 millimeter.
Was that the first time you experienced
That was my first experience with any kind of
within
attack.
any type of action?
Any kind of action.
How did you feel?
Well, I felt, well, at first I thought, wow, them guys, you know, you're like cheering for a football game.
It's a football game.
Yeah, because, I mean, it was off, it wasn't right over us. When it was right over us, that was a different story. The shrapnel started coming down. All of those shells, you know, burst into a bunch of projectiles.
Yes.
And some of them are pretty big, and when they land by you, you wonder, wow, what if that had hit me? You know? And so, anyway, we got to Okinawa, and where we were landing was next to a village called Kin, which is still a big village today, I guess. But the beach was only big enough for 2 LSTs at a time, and here our battalion must have been on at least 3, and we were probably number 4, and they were trying to unload over there, and they had to build a ramp to get up off the beach. So it was a slow operation. So we sat out there all night long waiting at anchor. And as soon as a red alert would come on and they'd sound the alarm on the ship, and all the LSTs that were waiting out in the harbor there would start making smoke and making smoke like crazy. I mean, sometimes but then the breeze would come along and take it away, you know. So it wasn't doing an awful lot of good. It was just showing them where the ships were.
You're thinking to yourself, you're a target now.
Just follow the smoke, right?
Yes.
So we would, you know, we're cursing the Navy, and they didn't know what they were doing, you know. And our skipper was 21 years old, we found out, on our LST. And I mean, he was so green, but I give him credit. You know, he found his way up there. Of course, he was in a convoy. We were zigzagging all the while. And got to give the guy credit at that age to be put in that kind of situation, where knowing that he was responsible for all these troops and equipment. And
Well, this is one thing to me that's amazing, is that when you see these war movies and different things that go on, And you're thinking, well, those are 35, 40-year-old men? No.
No.
Those 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds
Yeah,
doing stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
it is amazing.
It is amazing.
He had a good head on his shoulders.
The
Well,
greatest generation.
and then we didn't always give him too much credit. Because here we're sitting out there all night long, and there are all these airways going on, and some of the planes were going by pretty close. And they weren't ours. They had red circles on them, Japanese.
Oh, Japanese.
But anyway, the second day, they must have got word that it was going to. They didn't want all the troops sitting out there, which I think was a good move.
We voted on that one.
So we pulled up anchor and started out. We didn't know where we were going, but we went down around the island of Okinawa, which is, we probably had like a 40-mile trip to make that night, and down around the island, came up the other side, and went into what was, we found out later, was Green Beach 3, which was a real shallow beach coming out on the west side of the island. And there were already a couple of LSTs there unloading, but there was plenty of room for more. So our guy pulls in. We got there late in the afternoon, and the tide was pretty well out, apparently, because we didn't get in as far as the other LSTs before we hit bottom, you know. We went in slow, and as soon as we hit bottom, they backed way out, dropped the hook out there, you know, dropped the anchor off the stern. And then he picks up speed, hits the beat pretty hard, you know, you have to hang on, and runs her right up on the ground as far as he can. Then they open we're sitting in there watching all this. The guy come up there and start working the hydraulic doors. He opened the V doors, and then we look out, and one of the officers went out and had a big pole, you know, and he was going to measure see how much water we had to contend with out there. And it looked good on one side, but then the closer you got to the middle of the ramp, the deeper it was. It was too deep to get any equipment off.
Yeah.
So apparently he was communicating with the bridge up there and said, we can't unload here. Not the way it is. So he tries to pull himself off.
It was in too deep.
And by this time, he couldn't move the ship.
Oh, dear.
Couldn't move it. There we were.
Sitting on the bottom.
Couldn't unload. Well, they finally tried to get this ditch digger rod. And this big spool was, I don't know, I had never seen one before, with little buckets on it that dug into the ground, you know, to dig ditches with it. We used them to dig our trenches, foxholes, you know, we used for foxholes. But anyway, he only got halfway to shore. He got off all right, but he stayed to one side. And he just barely got by it was a shell hole, I think a bomb crater that we were right in front of, was right in front of us, but we didn't know. Of course, you couldn't see it through the water, you know, the surf and everything. So anyway, he got off, and he only got halfway to shore before the tide was coming in and caught up with him. And the water started flying off the fan, you know, and that ended it. They had to abandon it right there. So anyway, we waited, closed the doors, and they waited for high tide, and put some cables over to the other ship. They tried everything to get that. They finally got it turned just a little bit. So then they decided they had room to get our truck off, right? And we were next to go off. And but they didn't want anybody on it. So first thing you know, here comes this amphibious personnel carrier, Marine Corps, you know. And they backed that right up in the ramp. And they said, hey guys, load up your gear and go. We're going to go. So they took us ashore and that. And we got ashore, and they dropped us off on the beach. And we watched the truck try to make it. And he came down off the ramp and cut it short as he could to get around that hole. And of course the truck went up on his side a little bit, but it was it was all-wheel drive. And he managed to get through it and out of there without tipping over. And so then there we were on the beach on Okinawa, right? Of course, we all had our weapons and 60 rounds of ammunition and 3 days worth of meals on our back. And so that our truck got to shore and we loaded in the back of that. And a guy in a Jeep says, I'll show you the way across the island, he said, but you got to stay right tight to me. So we did. We followed. He gave us the follow through these gook roads, and this has just recently been taken by the Marine Corps, and we didn't hit any resistance going across. But they said you better be ready with your rifle, so we were, but nobody got upset with it. We went right across the island, and we got to the other side, and they said, here's where you stay tonight, you guys, and wait for the next convoy to come up the other side of the island. So that's where we spent the night. And we weren't that far from where the fleet was protecting the landings,
Mm-hmm.
So we got hit pretty hard. They got hit pretty hard by the Japanese that night. They hadn't really started their kamikaze attacks yet. They were still bombing, dropping their bombs and strafing. In fact, we spent one night on the beach in this LST before we went ashore. And we had a Japanese bomber go so close to us, he must have been an observer from Japan, probably some high echelon officers or something. And they were just skimming the harbor out there, checking on what the ships were, I guess. And they went by the stern. We were on general quarters all night. I was in the cruise quarters there, right on the tail end of the ship. So it sounded like he was going to hit us, He came so close. But he was too low. They couldn't shoot at him because he was right down between the ships,
Mm-hmm.
And so he got out of there without getting shot down. And that was the only close call we had that night. But we sat on the beach all night during that the air raids on the fleet. And as I say, the next morning they took us up across the island, and we had to spend the night sleeping on the ground or wherever you could find a soft spot to sleep. And not that we slept very much anyway, because there was so much going on. All the fireworks, all night
Close
long.
your eyes.
And a shrapnel, wow, falling out of the sky, a lot of it. And so then we get back to, finally, a convoy came through the next morning, and we got in the tail end of that. And there were probably 20 trucks or so, all going up through those narrow roads. And we hadn't gone very far, and we were watching. We were on top watching what was going on, and we met a tank coming at us. One of ours, of course, luckily. And he was coming down the same road we were going up. And those roads were narrow, too narrow for, to have a tank pass you without, you had to get off the road. Well, there was no place to go. It was all rice paddies at that point. And so Lido got over as far as he couldn't stop, because the tank was rolling right along. And the tank went over the edge, just missed us, come back up on as he got by us. And when he straightened up to go down the road, the back of the tank hit the back of our truck and almost upended us right there. And so that was, and here we're seeing these wrecked Japanese tanks, and apparently he was going up through and clearing off their tank opposition, It was a good looking tank.
Where does a tank carry its gas? I mean,
they can probably only get 3 miles to a gallon.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to have,
Oh, the hundreds of gallons.
yeah. I mean,
But boy, they can move, I'll tell you.
Mhm.
And those guys knew what they were doing. They went by that convoy. I mean, they weren't wasting any time. They had places to go and things to do.
they didn't care what was in their way.
Yeah, they didn't want to have a bunch of CBs holding them up.
Was this before the women were jumping over the cliff with their kids?
Well, that happened mostly on Saipan.
Oh.
It did happen on Okinawa too,
Why were they doing that?
but
Because
where
they
the
were
civilians
wanting
were
to
committing
marry and
suicide
rape and torture.
on jumping off the cliffs with the women with their babies and stuff.
And screaming.
But when we got up to Kin, we found out they had moved a lot of their civilians up there when the Americans started bombing Okinawa before the invasion. We bombed heck out of Naha, the capital city there. There wasn't anything left in them. Those big buildings were all gone, just rubble. And so they moved all their people into these small villages, which was smart for them, for the sake of the civilians. And so this village that we were up close to, that we had to go through after we landed, or the others did, we didn't, but was full of these civilians, and a lot of them were from the Philippines, we found out. They were speaking Spanish amongst themselves, and some of our guys were from New York City. They'd brought up in a Spanish household, you know. And I was with a guy one day, and he said, "This guy's speaking Spanish." So he went over and started talking to him. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, the Japs brought them in from the Philippines to do their work, you know, to make." They were boring these tunnels through all these mountains to put their artillery in, you know, so that they could bomb or shoot hell out of us. And so that was interesting to find that out.
And you said that a lot of the people, the women, were committing suicide with their kids because of what they were told by the Japanese,
Yeah.
what we were going to do to them.
Yeah. They'd jump off these cliffs. They had, they found footage of that. Well, the American Army guys had got some footage of them jumping off, throwing their kids off and jumping right out behind them.
Dad, did you bring the CD that Ted made for you for your birthday when he told this story, the background story of CBs? Did you bring it to
No.
Florida?
I
My brother did a lot of research on the CBs. It was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's too bad. Okay, next one.
Yeah.
Well, that was our experience on the invasion day, and of course, we were reunited with our battalion. We felt a little more comfortable, but they had only pitched these big squad tents with about 50 guys in them, cot to cot, and I ran into the same problem there. We'd been sleeping on the dirt down there that first night that we got ashore, and I get up there, and the guy come around, "Harwood, where's your sack?" I said, "No, not again." He said, "Yeah, you're on the 12 to 4.
Oh, jeez.
I suppose they thought we'd had a real soft, easy time of it. So I'm on duty, on guard duty again that night.
Well, that's it. There's nobody around.
So anyway, that was my experience, really. But of course, this was in April of '45, and the island wasn't secured until latter part of June '45.
What you went into service in 45?
44.
44, and when did you get out?
I got out in 46.
46. 44 to 46.
Yeah, I was in about 2 years. And I spent all that rest of that year on Okinawa. And our assignment was to build an airstrip on Okinawa, and which we did, and it opened up. You couldn't believe, guys, these planes that came in and landed on that little strip. But we had a lot of taxiways and parking spots and there were fighter planes, Marine Corps operated Corsairs, and they were one of the better Navy fighters that they had. The F-6Fs were great, F-4Fs and F-2Fs were all great airplanes, but they couldn't keep up with they didn't have the speed that the Japanese fighters had. Corsair came along and they put a bigger engine in it, and it had a nice wing on it, and they could pretty much, and they were tough airplanes. Boy, they could take a lot of.
So all the time you were on Okinawa, the island wasn't secured.
It was almost all the time.
Yeah.
Of course, they kept me there after the war ended, and I was building roads and recreation areas for the fleet.
He does have a
But
funny story too.
mostly roads for the government, the military government. Army took over, and around every village they'd set up their tents and their headquarters, and they'd want roads here and roads there, so we'd go build them some roads, you know.
Is that when you ran over that guy's Jeep?
No, that was building the strip.
Oh.
That wasn't your first mistake, though, was it?
No, it wasn't my last.
Boy,
But anyway, it was one of them.
Just one of many. The first mistake was when you signed your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll go in.
Yeah, they put me in dozers, and usually I was off in the countryside somewhere by myself. I spent most of my time on a big D8 dozer, sometimes alone, sometimes with a bunch of others, and sometimes at night, which wasn't fun, working alone because the Japs were having a habit of jumping up on the back. They were low on ammo, so they'd use a knife on you. And you couldn't hear them coming, you know. And the lights were all down on the strip where the other guys were working. We were working just on the machine lights. You know, there's 2 headlights on the front and 1 tail light on the back. So that wasn't any fun that night. And during the daytime, I could deal with it because we had to carry our rifles on the machines. We had to, anywhere we went, our rifles went with us. And as I say, we had 60 rounds, so we had lots of ammo.
just, you
We had them on our belts. But anyway, one night 2 of us were using the same dozer, and one would patrol while the other guy was on the dozer. That was nice, you know. Except that this guy that I was working with from Indiana, he hated every minute of it, and he was no good. When he was watching for me, I never saw him all night. When he was running the tractor, I followed him wherever he went, you know, trying to give him some protection. But they didn't hit us. I don't know why not, because they were all around.
oh, luck of the draw.
Yeah, the luck of the draw. And then I think the closest experience I had with getting wiped out completely was I was up there dozing one day all by myself. What I had to do was clear off the brush and trees off of a big area on top of a hill, and I'd get it down to the coral, and they were coming in and loading that coral with either a clamshell or a stiff arm load. Can't think of the name of it. But anyway, they'd load the coral on the trucks and haul it down and surface the runway, you know, with it, and roll it and grade it. But anyway, I was dozing, and of course that roar of that big engine, you don't hear anything around you at all, you know. first thing I knew, I felt something, you know. And I didn't know what the heck it was. It shut down and so, because it was close enough. So this guy, the Corsairs, had been on a mission up to Japan. And they'd hit the Japanese island. They went up there, they had belly tanks on. And as soon as they got attacked up there, they'd release the belly tanks. And, but they were, this day they were, I guess, attacking the railroad stations and stuff, strafing them, you know. And this guy got all shot up from ground fire. And he had no hydraulic control, lost all his hydraulics. So when he got back to try to land, they told him, you better bail out, because he couldn't get the gear down, he couldn't get the flaps down. So they told him to fly in over the airport towards the sea, towards the ocean, and bail out. So what he did was, he came right across, he must have come right over my head, but he was up there so far, I didn't hear him at all. And he rolled it upside down, they told me afterwards, dropped out of it, and opened the chute and landed nicely, you know. But the plane, when it's upside down, it tends to do this, you know. So it did a split S right out of it, and came right back towards, right across the strip. It's a wonder it didn't hit him, and you know, it's
Right back at him.
yeah. He must not have missed him by too much. It didn't miss me by much, I'll tell you. It shook the ground when it hit it. There was nothing visible. It hit right downside of me. It just disintegrated that airplane. There was nothing left of it that was visible above ground. I mean, just a big hole in the ground.
Wow.
But luckily, he wasn't in it. I didn't know that. I thought there was a pilot in it, you know. But he wasn't in it. Some kid come running over from a strip. I said, geez, look at that. I was worried about the pilot, you know. He said, oh, no, he's all right.
What a story.
Yeah.
Back in them days.
Wow. So that was my experience with that.
Yeah, I think you've told me before, but maybe you can tell these guys. How did you get your Japanese sword?
Well, when the war ended, I didn't capture it myself.
Oh, you didn't?
No. But when the war ended, they found a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it was turned into them by the Japanese people that finally surrendered, you know. Anyway, our battalion had a lot of souvenir stuff like that, and they gave it, handed it out.
He still has it, yeah.
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 I had a Japanese submachine gun they gave me.
What did you do with that?
Threw it in the ocean. I could not.
How would you get it home?
I had to carry it about a mile, all my stuff, one trip. When I came home, they said, you got to carry all your stuff in one trip. You can't come back after more. And the ship was way out on this causeway. It was a APA, that's assault transport. And so I had a sea bag and a small bag and a foot locker that I built. I got home yet. I still got my foot locker.
Where is
Yes.
that? Have I
It's
seen
in the
it?
cellar.
Down in the cellar.
Oh,
And I had to carry that all one load out there.
You didn't need a machine gun.
So I didn't need a machine gun, no. So I put that in the ocean when I found out what I was going to have to do.
It would have been worth a lot of money, but
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I came home on an assault transport, and they were nice. They had on the bulletin board when I got on. I got looking around, and they were asking for temporary crew members. If anybody was interested, you could sign up for it. You didn't have to. And I said, I'm going to sign up for that because I was curious to see, how I'd like to see more about it. So I was a carpenter's mate by this time, and after we got all the building of the strip done, all the equipment sat idle, and they gave us guys other jobs, I got put on the carpenter's crew, which was kind of nice. I liked that. We were putting up Quonset huts. We put up a lot of Quonset.
Why he built five houses.
And
Yeah.
I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy the concrete work, but I enjoyed the.
Who does? Italians.
Yeah,
Italians enjoy concrete work.
From
Yeah.
scratch.
how true.
Yeah. No, my brother Butch, he was in the reserves, National Guard rather. He did exactly what you did. He built roads. He run the backhoes and all
Yeah.
the big machinery. Right.
Yeah. Well, when we were working on the roads for the government, the military government, we had a small crew, and it was really nice. We had one officer. He was a brand new 90-day wonder
They call him, Bill.
ensign out of, I don't know where, Delaware or somewhere. He got his commission by going 90 days to the Naval Academy. They had special courses for those people. And he was great. He really was.
He was smart.
Yeah,
He stayed out of the way, and he let the guys who
He
knew
did.
what they were going to do run the show.
Yeah.
It's exactly what
He
happened
did.
when I was in the service.
He'd come and ask us what we needed, because our equipment had all been turned in. But we had a depot on the island where all the CB equipment had been turned in. Anything we needed was there, grader, bulldozer, trucks. So he'd take us over there in the Jeep, 3 or 4 of us, go over, and we'd bring back whatever we could get started and needed, we'd bring it back, So we had all the equipment to bring in the coral and fill and work on the roads. They were just short roads in off the other roads, like a long driveway and stuff. But he made sure that we had lots of donuts from the Red Cross.
He was one smart. He was one smart
Yeah.
90-day wonder.
He sure was. And not only that,
I don't know.
but he insisted he'd run the roller, and the roller had all mechanical steering and everything. And that was geared way down so you could turn that front roller, It was a 3-wheel roller. He insisted, he said, I got to stay in shape. So he would.
You think with that?
You didn't finish your story about running over the Jeep.
Oh, I was trying to avoid that.
I know.
How the hell did you ever run over a Jeep?
Well, it wasn't easy. But anyway, what happened was this guy was a warrant officer.
Nobody liked
Now, there. I don't like warrant officer.
Warrant officers couldn't cuss the mustard, so they made a warrant
Yeah, that's
officer.
what they did.
Anyway, this guy was from Arkansas, and he supposedly was watching over my job, and I didn't see anything of him for days. And I'm up in there bulldozing, and I had an idea of what we had to do, so I just went ahead and was doing it. Well, he comes up one day and he said, Harwood, you got to get moving here. We're ready to start using this pit. He says, you got to get a lot more done. I said, okay. So I started using high reverse, going like hell. And first thing you know, I'm backing up, dropping I wasn't paying much attention to that Jeep. And I felt the tractor raise up. And I said, oh, hell, there's no rock there. And I kicked it off. Look down, and here I'm on top of the Jeep. Oh my
the
God!
guys all
That's
But
the
he
end of my
wasn't-
career in the Navy.
Did you get a rep for that, or no?
all the guys were clapping.
Oh, yeah. Nobody likes warrant officers, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah, well, and that's what they told me. They said it's about time somebody did that.
They just,
He's
they're
been asking
smartasses.
for that ever since we started here.
And they especially pick on the enlisted people.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? They don't pick on any officers.
No.
No, they're a warrant officer. They ain't gonna say nothing to them. They're gonna pick on the enlisted people.
yeah. So he's swearing and cursing at me, and I said, sorry, but that's the way it is. It's done. I can't undo it. And
Then we had
We'll get your replacement.
Yeah.
so these guys, we had built that. The Japanese had a little bus, looks like our 12-passenger buses we have, somewhat today. It was a converted something. Anyway, they had a big, was big enough, had about 3 or 4 windows on the side. We converted it into a chow wagon and
Food truck.
hauled it around with a 6x6 towed it.
Only 10.
And the chow crew was right in there, and they had hot plates and everything, you know, gas fired
The food truck.
burners and everything in there. They could serve us hot meals right out on the strip, which they did, which was great.
Food truck.
That's where
Well,
the food trucks come from.
Well, about the time I ran over his Jeep, that chow wagon and he was down there by the chow wagon, see.
Oh,
He and a bunch
had
of
no
the other
idea.
guys, and who had been working on a taxiway there. They all pulled over with their equipment and went to get chow. So I went down, but I got off his Jeep, and he got on it and started up all right. But you ought to have seen it. It had a cloth top, you know, Jeep. And now instead of being flat across from front to back, it was looked just like a tent. The body went droop like this, you know, where I ran over it, bent the frame, you know, put the frame right on the ground.
And he drove it.
And
Oh,
drove
he
it.
got on it, started up, ran all right, steered all right. So he's driving down there, and he's sitting the side of the Jeep that comes up over was flat right down on the seat. You know? And he's sitting there half in and half out of the thing.
One of a kind.
And he drove down and stopped by the cow hall, and this guy Borbo, who was one of the really most knowledgeable enlisted guys that I knew as far as construction. He had a lot of experience in it. He was a guy maybe 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He was laughing his head off and kidding the heck out of this warrant officer. And I thought, wow, he's really and this warrant officer was taking it. He didn't give him any grief.
He did you, though.
Oh yeah. Well, the upside to the story is I never heard anything from anybody. They were except them laughing at it. I shouldn't say that. I knew the guy. The guy in our tent was in charge of the truck repair shop. So he came in that night laughing about it because he knew
You did
the
it.
guy. They told him that Harwood ran over him with a bulldozer.
Don't worry, we'll fix it.
So it went right through the battalion. I knew everybody knew about it. And no, I never heard anything from the. I thought sure they'd say you're busted, but no. And but he had to go without his Jeep for about 2 weeks, so he really paid because the guy in the truck shop told me. He said he'd come in. He thought I was going to fix it that day. You know, I said no, I can't even start on it for 10 days. He had to jack it all up, you know. But he finally got it back. Well, the next time I ran into him, really, he stayed away from me. He
Ran into him. You don't mean
Yeah,
that,
that wasn't
right?
up for him.
I don't
Met him.
understand.
The next time I ran
Well,
into
said to
him,
you.
they sent a small group of us from the battalion over to another little island right at the end of the war. And we didn't even know whether it was occupied by the Japanese or not, but we went over there. And we found out it wasn't, of course. They had been, but they'd cleaned them off. There were 14 Marines buried on the beach. And all they had little crosses on them. And I saw that when we went ashore there, and that was kind of sobering. And I never forgot it. But I was working on the concrete crew. Boy, I hated that in the hot weather, you know, trying to puddle that concrete. And so I went in. Finally, this guy Borba, I got to know him pretty well after this incident with the warrant officer. He and I got pretty close, and we used to play cards and stuff. And I said to him one day, "Gee, I'd like to get back on heavy equipment." And he was over there, So he said, okay. Enough said. So one day I'm over there working with a concrete crew, and a Jeep pulled up. Oh my God, it was that warrant officer. But Borba was with him.
Yeah.
And he didn't see me. He didn't get a look at me. I saw they went by where I was or something anyway. He hadn't seen me yet, or recognized me anyway. And apparently Borba said, "Come on, we got to go get another operator. We need another operator." You know, so he said, "There's one on the concrete crew or something." Anyway, I went over to the Jeep and he said, "That's the son of a bitch."
You take care.
Good memory.
And Barbara says, "Get in the back."
I'll take care of it.
Don't pay any attention. Don't pay any attention to that guy. So I didn't say anything. I jumped in the back. So then they take me down. He takes me down to the waterfront, and there's a officer standing there I had never seen before, Army. And he says, so this warrant officer said to me, "Start up one of those dozers and go with this guy, this officer, show you what he wants you to do." So I did. I went over and started up a D8, and the guy said, so then I got off and started talking to him. "What do we got to do?" And he said, "Do you remember seeing those graves on the beach? The Marines were buried." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to help us find them, because we're not finding them." He had a crew of, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 guys. They were all black. And they were with Graves registration. So they were around trying to pick up and reclaim all these bodies that had been buried during the invasion, you know. Well, you suppose he says, so I went down to the beach, and I thought, sure, I know right where they were. I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Take off about 6 inches. And he said, then we'll run some test holes to see." I said, I was worried about getting into the bodies, you know. And no, he said, "Just take off 6 inches or so. I'll walk along right behind the blade and signal you when you're taking off about what I think you should do." So I go along and down through where I thought they were buried, and I'd get down to where I thought we were behind them, and I'd stop, you know, and say, "That's about, you know, they got to be in there somewhere." So he'd run his test hole, find nothing. They'd dig down maybe a foot or so. So then I'd go back and I'd take another 6 inches out. We never found those bodies that day. And he couldn't stay. When it started getting dark, he said, "I got to get back to the main island before dark." So, I don't know, somebody brought him over. Couldn't navigate after dark, I guess. So they left. And as long as I was there, they never came back looking for those bodies. So I don't know whether they ever got them. It still bothers me to this day.
Yeah.
But
Can't do anything about that.
no.
Okay, should we see what we got?